Welcome back, Work Besties. So today we've got a video that has been requested, and it's called Tips for Staying Organized During the Workday. I get asked sometimes, what do you recommend for organization tips to help me boost productivity and just kind of stay on top of things and organize? And you know what? Organization looks so different for everyone. Everyone has a different system that works for them. I'm going to share in this video things that have worked for me, and maybe they'll work for you too, and maybe not. So let's get into it, shall we? So I start every day, or end every day, depends how I'm feeling, with creating a to-do list for that day. So I'll have like a Monday to-do list, Tuesday to-do list, Wednesday, so on and so forth. But what I want to break down, I guess, with a to-do list, and I just straight pen to paper. I make little boxes so that I can check off during the day. But I really break down tasks into smaller pieces, which is, I feel like back in the day where I fell short, is I would put a huge task on my to-do list and look at it and be like, I don't even know where to start. This is so overwhelming. And so really that practice of breaking a bigger project or task or whatever you're working on down into bite-sized chunks, and then assigning those as specific items on your to-do list. And maybe it spans multiple days, but that practice of parsing it down and making actionable items really helps me plan for my days. So I either start the day by looking at my calendar, looking at all my deliverables due, any meetings, and then I create a realistic workday amount of work for myself based on what else I have going on that date, and then breaking down a bigger project. So, say I have a meeting coming up and I'm preparing for it and I need to review some reports or documents or briefs in order to prepare for that meeting. I'm not necessarily gonna put on my to-do list, prepare for a meeting. I'm gonna put review, brief, prepare notes, write agenda. Like I'm really breaking them all out. And so that's kind of how I approach it. And I do it day to day. And sometimes at the end of the workday, I'll do it for the next workday if I know I have an early start to the day or like a quick right into meetings kind of day. But that really helps me stay organized during the day and really helps me kind of manage the amount of realistic work I can achieve in a workday. Because I know it's really tempting sometimes to just write all these things on your to-do list, and then it's so defeating at the end of the day when you haven't checked them all off and you're like, well, was I not productive enough today? Like what went wrong? Reasonable, actionable to-do lists that are broken down into realistic chunks of work. That's number one. Decluttering your workspace. And that's just not talking about the physical workspace. It's also talking about your digital workspace. So we'll start with the physical first. Your desk, wherever you're working. For me personally, it has to be spotless. Otherwise, I'm gonna be spending time cleaning the desk. Like I know my notepad is always to my right, my left, I always have my little notepad for just like meeting notes and quick things I want to take during the day. I have, my pens here. I have a very organized structure, and it needs to remain that way. Otherwise, I will waste time during the day cleaning it. So decluttered, it's clean, it's easy to find things, everything's where it should be. And then the digital space being decluttered. So yeah, I have a ton of tabs open, but I kind of review them to be like, what do I still need open? What documents can I just close and I'm done with? I don't like to let my inbox pile up too much. And if I get a ton of emails, I kind of create folders to store them away to address at a later time. I don't like to look at a notification of, 2,000 emails unread. Like that stresses me out. It doesn't make me feel very organized, and I really think it does impact my productivity during the day. So making sure you're cleaning not just your physical space, but you're also tidying your digital space on your device, however that looks for you. A big one that I've found to help with organization, especially if you're working with other people, is to create shared documents when it comes to project work or anything that someone needs to be informed on, collaborative work, so it avoids them contacting you during the day, which potentially might break your focus on something, to get updates on something that can already be readily available for them. So depends on, I guess, what you're kind of working on with that person, but I've found Canva to be a great tool. This isn't sponsored. I'm a big fan. And I use some of their documents to share with my team to say, hey, if you ever need to check in to see where we're at with this, let's get a shared document. And also too, if I'm trying to get an update on something, I know I can just go into the document. I don't necessarily need to contact that person. So that's helped me stay organized when it comes to working with a team. Leveraging calendars. And so I actually use both a digital calendar for my days, and then I also use a pen and paper calendar that's on my wall during the days. They serve different purposes. So my digital one is basically every meeting I have, every appointment I have. That's where I do time blocking, which we'll get into in a minute. It's all in my digital calendar. And then my wall calendar that I have right beside my desk, it outlines any major deliverables, timelines, projects, the big stuff. And I put sticky notes on the days that they're due with any details kind of in them, so that any point in the day I can take a look to kind of see how much is on my plate from a deliverables perspective in the month, to also help me with managing workload and timelines. If someone's like, oh, I need this thing to be due by this date, and I can already see that I have a couple major things due that day, I'm not going to commit to that. I'm going to say, well, realistically, I could do this day or this day. And so it helps me kind of quickly manage my workload. And then it helps those big deliverables not get lost in my digital calendar, because it can get quite busy. So that's how I like to do things. And then time blocking. So this is a practice I probably implemented, I want to say 2 years ago, where I actually block out different times of the day, whether that's to check emails, whether that's, to take a break, whether that's to do some deep focus work on whatever I'm working on that day. And so most of my calendar is actually time blocked out by like the hour. And that includes meetings and stuff too, but I can take a clear look at my day and know, okay, from 9 to 10, I'm doing creative work. From 10 to 11, I'm working on this business document. From 11 to 12, I'm addressing my inbox and emails and anything that I still need to get back to people on. So time blocking out your day, I find really effective for giving you kind of a plan that complements that to-do list that day. It keeps you more in control of your time. I find when you time block, people are less likely to last minute schedule things, or maybe that's just from my experience, because they can see your calendar's kind of full. So anything last minute, it has more of a direct conversation with you of like, hey, any chance you're free at 2 today? And you kind of look at your time block and be like, yeah, I can shift things around, or no, I really can't because I have to focus on this because it's due. So taking kind of ownership of that time and blocking out your days, I found to be really helpful. Also just keeping me on track. Like if I know, yep, I've been working on this for an hour, but I need to work on something else now, and that hour's come up, it's kind of like, all right, we got to shift focus now. So I found it to be a great way to organize my days. Might not work for everyone, definitely works for me. I think a big thing when it comes to organization is also prioritization. So understanding where your real priorities lie right now. And if you don't know where they lie, like that's okay. If you have a bunch of work on your plate and you don't know what to prioritize, ask your manager. Set up some time to understand what of this should take my priority right now, and then really understand the prioritization of everything on your plate so that you can allocate time accordingly. I spend a lot of time prioritizing different things, working with my team to understand this is the priority this week, this is not the priority this week, this is kind of something you can passively work on when you have some free time, but these are the non-negotiables that your attention needs to be on. And so having discussions about prioritization I think is really important, so everyone's kind of on the same page and there's a lot of clarity around it. But prioritization I think is very, very important when it comes to organization. This one I've spoken to a few times. I don't like to check my inbox every second of the day. I actually like to allocate times in my day to look at my inbox. I find it for me, if I'm focused in something and I see emails coming in, I'm immediately like, oh, what is that? And it breaks my focus. I actually have notifications turned off for my emails so that I have to intentionally go in, refresh them, take a look at them, allocate time to it. Making time during your day, multiple times during your day, whatever works for you, to address your inbox and spend time there versus feeling this need to constantly monitor it throughout the day. I think the reality is there's so few things that are like super, super urgent, critical, time sensitive. And if something is, I don't think emailing is the route to go. I think someone's gonna, direct message you or call you. For me, I've never run into issues with emails only being checked a few times a day. And it really helps me stay focused at whatever I'm doing without kind of breaking that concentration to be like, oh, who's this from? Oh, who's this from? So checking emails intentionally throughout the day at specific times versus letting your focus get broke to go every time an email comes through. Whenever I'm doing deep focus work, notifications are turned off, phone is in do not disturb. I actually rarely keep the sound notifications on, but if I have it on, those get turned off, so I'm strictly just focused into what I'm doing. I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but when my concentration gets broken, it can be really challenging for me to refocus into something, so I try to create the perfect or as good of an environment as I can to set myself up for the best possible success to be focused on a task, especially if it's something more boring that I'm not overly motivated to want to do. Sort of removing any distraction that you can, whether that's notifications, whether that's something in your workspace, whether that's roommates or family that's around, kind of communicating like for the next hour, I'm not to be disturbed because I need to focus on this when it gets to that really deep thinking, deep concentration kind of phase of your day. And so I would say starting with the notifications though, it's very important. Nothing pops up on my screen. I'm deep in the work. Leveraging AI tools is a newer one, and I know AI can seem very intimidating. For many of us, it's trying to find that practicality of AI in our work and our day-to-day lives, even though there's so many ways it's already integrated that we might not think about. But I think leveraging AI in a non-intimidating way, in a very simple, basic way, can help you stay organized, and it can take a lot of the mundane work off your plate. It can also take like that initial thinking. So think about it in the sense of starting a project plan. Say you're like, I know I need to make a project plan for this big task I have going on, and I don't know how to break it down into small sizes. This is actually a great tip too if you're trying to figure out how to parse down those actionable items in your to-do list. AI can help you do that. It's, as simple as a query of, how would you word this? Can you create in a table a project plan for whatever you're working on for someone who's never done this before? I find like if you give the tool more information of like kind of if you want a beginner level or an expert level, it'll dictate how it kind of feeds you the information. So that's where I would start. It'll spit out to you kind of a rough project plan with higher level details that then you can go in and edit that and make it your own versus having to start from the ground of making it. Saves quite a bit of time, saves quite a bit of thinking. I cannot tell you how many times in my career I've just like stared at a wall and just been like, I know I need to do this thing. I don't know where to start. And staring at the wall is the only thing that I feel like I can do right now and think about it, but nothing's coming to me. That's where I feel like AI has kind of helped me a lot, is just getting me started and getting me going on projects, So I think leveraging AI can help keep things quite organized in your days as well. Finding a file naming system that, one, makes sense when you look at it. You're like, yes, I know what this document would be. And two, you can kind of apply it across a broad number of things that you're making on your computer or you're saving or you're working on, I think is really important. And then from the jump, like making that a focus to keep your digital files organized, because we all know the headache of trying to find something and you don't know where it is and you're like, logically, where would I put this? And then unlogically, where would I put this? And then you can't find it neither and you're like, I don't know where to find this. Creating a filing system that your team can stay consistent with, that makes sense to the team as well, so that as not just you, but people in your company, people in your team are going to find documents, they know kind of what to expect in terms of how things are labeled, how things need to stay updated, where they can find things. So really organized digital system for your folders and for your files is quite great when it comes to organization. This one's more specific, I think, to working from home, but organization, I think a big piece of it comes down to having some sort of a routine. I think when we get out of routine or every day kind of feels wildly different, it can get hard to get into this rhythm of work and what works for you, and it's kind of staying consistent with that organization structure so that when you show up for work, you kind of have a plan of what to expect or what to do or the steps to get you into an organized space, then you can get into the work. So I think setting up some sort of routine, whether that's starting work at the same time every day, doing something consistent in the morning before work, taking breaks, if you have dogs, walking the dogs around the same time of the day, making sure you're taking your lunch, like having some kind of structure so that days become a little bit more predictable so that you can plan better for them is really important, or at least is really, really important for me. A big one that I have learned is stop trying to multitask. Just one thing at a time. Like this is probably the biggest saying in the last year for myself that I always come back to, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed, when I have tons on my plate. I just stop and I'm like, okay, one thing at a time. Like that is how you get through all of that work that feels impossible to complete all at once. It's just one thing at a time. And that's how you get through it, and then you get through it and it's fine. But you have to approach it, at least speaking for myself, you have to approach it one step at a time, because multitasking, one, definitely impacts the output of my work for sure. And two, it makes it so much harder to get things completed because I'm just jumping all over the place mentally, that at the end of it, one, I'm even more exhausted, and two, I probably have a decent amount of rework to do on things because of my focus wasn't solely on that. So I potentially miss some things, attention to detail gets lost. So I would say as much as possible, avoid multitasking. There's so few people out there that can do it effectively. I used to be like, well, I'm one of those people. I'm not one of those people. And it's taken me a while to accept that, but I'm here and I'm happy to report that it's one step at a time is very, very effective. And the last one I'm gonna leave you with is take your breaks. And I'm not talking about, oh yeah, like I got up to make a coffee earlier and I took a break. A break is not a break if it is not both physical and mental. So if you are going, to make a coffee and you are still thinking about work, talking about work, you're not taking a break, you're still working. Taking the time to figure out how to disconnect from work, and then intentionally implementing that when you are taking breaks, whether that's 15 minutes walking the dogs, your hour for lunch, physically removing yourself from your workspace, from your laptop, and then mentally just shutting off for a bit. I get so exhausted when I'm just running constantly on this mindset of thinking about work and trying to problem solve or solution during the day when I'm not at my desk. I find that I am so much more creative and effective and better at problem solving and solutioning when I take a step to not think about work. Like, my best ideas probably come to me when I'm not thinking about them. And I feel like that's actually common when people aren't intentionally trying to do something and they take a step away to do something that just like fills their soul. The other stuff kind of comes to them just naturally. So I would say make sure that you're taking your breaks throughout your day and you're making sure to mentally be taking a break as well. I think that helps a lot with organization and just general overwhelm and output and efficiency and all of that good stuff. So that's what some of the things that have worked for me. I hope maybe you learned something in this video, or maybe you just enjoyed listening to the sound of my voice. Regardless, I appreciate you being here as always, and I'll see you soon, work besties. Toodaloo!